My parents warned me not to look out the window at night. I just discovered the horrifying reason why. Ever since I was a baby, my parents always told me, don't look out the window at night. I always asked them why, but they would just shrug it off with a creepy smile. As I grew older, I stopped questioning it, but I just never could have guessed the horrifying secrets my parents were hiding. Everyone in my town also followed this weird tradition, so I thought it was normal. That was until I went to college and noticed that none of the other kids were like this. So during Christmas, when I went to my parents' house, I remember them telling me not to look out the window. I gave them a smile and a small chuckle before telling them I wouldn't. However, curiosity struck me the moment they left the room. As I lay in the dark, I came to a decision. I was going to look out of the window. Just as my hand came to the sheer white curtain of the guest room, I paused. My mind flashed to that one time when I was 12. My parents were talking in the kitchen. I was home with the flu and was about to make my way to the sink for some water, but I stopped at the doorway. I hid behind the wall, peeking my head out from the doorway just an inch. My mother was crying and my father was holding her and rocking. That poor little girl. I feel horrible for her family, whispered my mother. My father just nodded and continued holding her. I went back to my room after that. Several hours later, my dad came up to my room with several pieces of wood and boarded up my windows. "What are you doing that for, Dad?" I asked him. "Oh, it's nothing. Just safety reasons," he replied. I learned at school the next day that a little girl was found dead the previous morning, the window broken and curtains torn. I snapped back to the present. My hand drew back from the curtain. I shook my head, cursing myself for being so weird. What was the worst that could happen? It was just a window, it couldn't hurt me, right? As I reached my hand out again, my instinct was telling me to stop. My gut twisted as I reached nearer and nearer. Just as I touched the curtain, a painful howl came from the forest surrounding the house. I flinched back, deciding to just lay down and try to get some sleep. I forgot how hard it was to get sleep in my hometown. Every night, coyotes howled for hours everywhere in town, or at least I thought they were just coyotes. The next night, I woke up in a cold sweat. I glanced over at the alarm clock next to my bed. It was midnight. I groaned and sat up in bed. A low growling sound from outside of my bedroom window. I thought back to last night and decided that I had made up my mind about looking out. I thrusted my arm towards the curtain and pulled back hard, almost ripping it away from the rod. I flattened myself against the wall next to the bed for a moment before I put one eye in front of the window. I immediately regretted my decision as I heard claws clacking up the house. I flung myself out of bed, tumbling on the floor. I stood up and got back up on the bed. I stuck my face closer to the window as the clacking got closer and closer. It suddenly stopped for a second before the most terrifying creature popped up from outside, emitting a horrible shriek as it did so. I can never forget its face, the way the hollow eyes oozed some kind of black substance, like tar, and the way its lips were pulled back into a gruesome grin, the teeth blood-stained and razor-sharp. It looked like it had 4 limbs, its front 2 slamming on the glass and pounding. As I was frozen in front of the window in terror, my parents burst into the room. My father held a shotgun. He marched up to my bed and yanked me away from the window. He pointed his shotgun at the creature, shooting a bullet at it. The thing scrambled away, leaving the window almost completely shattered. "Damn it, son, it was a simple task. Just don't look out the window. How hard is that?" my dad shouted at me. I wasn't processing his words. I was sitting on the floor, arms and legs splayed everywhere in utter shock. What the hell had I just seen? My mother ran to the bedroom door. She had tears in her eyes. "Is everyone all right?" she asked. "Yeah, we're fine. We still gotta get that creepy effing monster, though." "Nathan, get up. We got some work to do," my dad said. I got up as soon as I could. My dad thrust the shotgun into my arms and marched downstairs. He opened the basement door and descended, coming back with a machete and some kind of spray bottle. He sprayed the liquid onto the machete before walking to the front door and wait. "Dad, what are you doing?" I asked, confused. I was just traumatized, and now my dad is waiting at the door, machete in hand like he was about to kill someone. Instead of a response, my dad just hushed me. The house was quiet for several seconds before a loud banging and howling came at the front door. We heard a rip, and we knew the screen door was no more. The wood of the interior door started to splinter, and I took a few steps backward. My dad glared at me. "Nathan, now is not the time for this. Point the goddamn gun and get ready to shoot." I aimed the gun at the door, trying to find the spot where the howling was coming from. The door was strong, but it wasn't indestructible. The creature burst through the door, and I pulled the trigger in a moment of terrified panic. My dad knelt down and brought his machete down on the abomination's head. The howling ceased, and my mom rushed forward with a tarp to cover the spot where the door was destroyed. "Honey, are you okay?" my mom asked for the second time that night. She came up to me and kissed my cheeks, as if to make sure I was still there. She went over to my dad and did the same. "We're okay, both of you, get in the basement. I gotta clean this up." I asked, "Basement? Why the basement?" Everything was going by at the speed of light, and I couldn't help but question everything that was happening at the moment. "Let's just get in the basement. Your father needs to clean up," my mom said, grabbing my arm and pulling me to the basement. We sat on the couch down there for what seemed like hours before my dad came in and put the machete up. He sat on the chair in front of us with an exhausted sigh. The 3 of us sat in silence for a few minutes. In that time span, my brain was able to come up with a coherent sentence. "Dad, what was that thing?" He just looked up at me, eyes dark, and said, "Where do you think that howling came from?"
What was the most embarrassing thing you've used because you were too ready to go? 1. My ex. 2. A long time ago in a house far away there was 16-year-old me and my bedpost. My foot slipped and I got stuck and I had to yell for my mom. Nothing was ever said and the next day I came home after school and my childhood bed was gone and just a new bed with no footboard or posts was in its place. Nothing was ever said. I think I died a little that day. 3. Felt my relationship change with my hairbrush after I decided to try that one day. 4. I used a Sharpie with the chocolate starfish one time, but I used the wrong side and as I was pulled it out, the muscle clenched and the cap came off. Luckily it wasn't sealed in and I could get it out. 5. I have a buddy who was an ER tech. He had a patient come in one time whose starfish swallowed a toy. While doctors and everyone were standing around trying to figure out how to extract it, they noticed a slight hum coming from somewhere and they realized that it was still on inside. 6. Not embarrassing, but a cucumber with olive oil. It was probably 15 inches long and quite wide because this wasn't an English breed. Grabbed it straight out of the fridge. I washed and peeled it after before throwing it on my salad. 7. When I was younger, a deodorant bottle. 8. Cucumber one time when I was drunk. We'll never do that again. People who lived out your fun time obsessions and regretted it. What happened? Early 20s and I had an attractive granny fetish. Went to a Chinese restaurant with a bar that had a reputation as being a pickup joint for 50, 60 and 70-year-olds. Went to the bar with a few friends for kicks and giggles and started chatting up ladies. I settle in on this older lady wearing a white leather suit, pants, vest and jacket. Her girls were selling out and she looked good. Lights were low so it made her features softer. We decide to leave and go back to her place for some fun. We hop in her car and head out. We get to her place and with real lights you can see she's much older than I thought she was and rougher looking too. I'm here and say well her body is good so I can get through this. We go to the bedroom and she goes to the bathroom to freshen up. Sue come out naked and oh my gosh. The loose skin. It was sagging and wrinkled. Then the bush. It was huge, she probably had not trimmed it in years. I could go on but you can see where I'm going. I still make love with her and it was gross. The worst part was he talking dirty in a granny voice. Since she drove me there I was basically trapped. I should have called a cab but I was broke. I stayed the night and we made love a couple more times. At her insistence. She was actually really good at using her mouth and me being 21. It was no problem getting me up again. Eventually she got tired and fell asleep. Woke up, she made me breakfast. Then I hopped in the shower and she came in and we had made love again. She then said she would drive me home. As I got dropped off my mother came out and saw me get out of the car. The worst was the lady saying and my mom hearing her thank me for the fun time. My mom did not bring it up but didn't talk to me for a few days and had a super disgusted look on her face for a few days.
A woman repeatedly parked in my private driveway, so when she refused to move, I blocked her in. She lost her temper and threatened to call the police, but I stood my ground. I live behind a popular train station, and cars often park on my street while people commute or pick up friends from the station. This makes parking a nightmare, and sometimes people park illegally across driveways or on double yellow lines. Before the lockdown, there was this one woman who started parking in my private driveway while waiting for her friend. The driveway is obviously part of my property, but it's conveniently located right behind the station. Every time I caught her parking there, I asked her not to because we need that space for ourselves. It's our private property. Each time, she'd just say she wouldn't be long and would usually leave after 10 minutes. I caught her doing this 3 times in person, but I've seen her on our security system doing it 11 times. Today, I left the house to pick up my daughter from nursery. When I returned, sure enough, she was sitting in my driveway again, waiting for her friend. I flashed my headlights, hoping she'd move, but she just indicated that she'd only be a few more minutes. This is where I think I might have overreacted. My 3-year-old daughter was in the car with me, desperate to pee, and my 7-month-old baby was crying to be held. So, I pulled up right in front of my driveway, blocking her in. I got my kids out of the car and headed into the house. As she realized what I was doing, she opened her car door and asked me to move my car. I ignored her and went inside. Luckily, my 3-year-old made it to the toilet just in time,